The Messerschmitt Bf 109 holds a record that still stands today. More of these fighters were built than any other in history, with over 33,000 units produced in less than 10 years. It was the aircraft flown by the highest-scoring aces the world has ever seen. Some of them reached more than 300 confirmed kills. It was fast and heavily armed, and it kept getting better with every version. For many, it became the symbol of German air power during the war. But underneath that reputation was a problem that most people never saw. Hidden deep in the design was a flaw so dangerous it ended up killing more than 1,700 German pilots. Most of them died before they ever had a chance to fight. This is the story of the Bf 109, the legendary fighter of the Second World War. To understand where this aircraft fits in, we need to look at the moment it arrived. In 1937, when it entered service, there was nothing else quite like it. At the time, it was the most advanced single-seat combat aircraft in the world. And when the war started, the Bf 109 became the backbone of Germany's fighter force. Even after newer aircraft appeared, such as the Focke-Wulf 190 in 1941, the Bf 109 stayed in production and active combat service all the way through to the final days of the war. But to really understand how it became that central, we need to go back even further, back to a time when Germany was not even allowed to have an air force. After the First World War, the Treaty of Versailles placed harsh limits on Germany's military. One of the key restrictions was a complete ban on building or flying combat aircraft. As far as the international community was concerned, Germany had no air force. But the reality on the ground was very different. During the 1920s and early 30s, Germany kept its aviation industry alive. Officially, it was civil aviation. In truth, it was military development hiding in plain sight. When the Nazis came to power, the disguise started to fade. Their goal was clear. They wanted to jump ahead of every other country and build something that could dominate the skies when the time came. One of the central figures in that effort was a Bavarian aircraft designer named Willy Messerschmitt. The aircraft he designed would go on to earn a fearsome reputation, especially among Allied pilots. Most of them called it the ME 109. But the proper designation was Bf 109, named after Bayerische Flugzeugwerke, the company where it was first developed. The world got its first real look at the Bf 109 during the 1936 Olympic Games in Berlin. While the eyes of the world were focused on the spectacle, Germany quietly unveiled its newest prototype. Without fanfare, a Bf 109 took to the skies and set a new international speed record, 610 kilometers per hour. It was more than just a demonstration of engineering. It was a signal. Germany was no longer rebuilding. It was ready to compete. There is a strange twist here, though. At that moment, Germany's aircraft engine industry had not quite caught up. So the prototype that made headlines was not powered by a German engine. Instead, it was fitted with a British-built Rolls-Royce Kestrel. That would change soon enough. Once Daimler-Benz introduced its new line of inverted V12 engines, the Bf 109 found the power plant it was meant to have. And with that, its full potential started to emerge. When it came to firepower, the earliest versions of the Bf 109 were modest. They carried just two MG-17 machine guns, each with 500 rounds mounted above the engine. These guns were synchronized to fire directly through the spinning propeller without striking the blade, a solution most aircraft of the time relied on. But this setup quickly became outdated. German intelligence found out that the British Spitfire was entering service with 8 wing-mounted machine guns. That changed everything. The Luftwaffe needed an answer fast. The Bf 109's armament was upgraded. The two MG-17 machine guns remained, but now with 1,000 rounds each. On top of that, engineers added two MG-FF cannons, one in each wing. These fired 20mm high-explosive shells from 60-round drum magazines. Each cannon could deliver around 750 rounds per minute, but because of the limited ammo capacity, that only gave the pilot about 15 seconds of actual firing time. Even so, these cannons brought a completely different level of damage, especially once the Germans introduced Menengeschoss, thin-walled high-explosive shells that detonated on impact. A single hit from one of these could rip through an enemy aircraft and send it straight down. Compared to the older machine guns, the cannons turned the Bf 109 into something far more dangerous. In later versions, German engineers added a third cannon just behind the engine. This one fired straight through the hollow propeller shaft, right through the middle of the spinning propeller. The barrel sat carefully aligned inside the shaft, avoiding any contact, and gave the pilot a perfectly centered shot. It was extremely precise, but the setup came with problems. The vibration from the engine, combined with the cannon's recoil, often made the system jam. Some pilots disliked it. Still, these were only early builds, and the Bf 109 was going to change a lot as the war moved forward. But the biggest problem, the one that kept killing German pilots more than enemy fire, was already baked into the design, and it would stay there. We will get to that in a moment. At this point, the Bf 109 was well ahead of most fighter aircraft in the world. It had a full metal airframe, a sealed cockpit, and landing gear that folded into the body of the plane. That sounds standard now, but back then, most countries were still flying biplanes made of wood and fabric. The Bf 109 felt like a leap into the future. Then came Spain. When the Spanish Civil War broke out, Germany saw a chance to test its new fighter in real combat. The Bf 109 went up against outdated Soviet designs and some early monoplane fighters. It completely outmatched them. German pilots gained serious combat experience, and engineers used those lessons to keep improving the aircraft. So by the time Germany invaded Poland in 1939, the Bf 109 was already the main frontline fighter of the Luftwaffe. Polish aircraft were mostly outdated, and German fighters quickly took control of the skies. After that, Germany invaded the rest of Western Europe. Once again, the Bf 109 played a key role, attacking targets, flying escort, and by now facing British Hurricanes and some early Spitfires during the evacuation at Dunkirk. But all of that was just preparation for what came next. The Battle of Britain. By the summer of 1940, Hitler had already taken most of Europe. Now he turned to Britain. The plan was to bomb them into surrender. The Luftwaffe launched heavy bombing raids, and the Bf 109s were assigned to guard the bombers. But a major issue appeared. The Bf 109 was a short-range fighter. It was not meant to escort for long distances. From bases in France, it had fuel for only 15 minutes over Britain. Then it had to turn back, and bombers flew slow. That caused constant problems. Fighters had to break off, leaving bombers unprotected. Many never made it home, not from combat, but because they ran out of fuel. In the air, the Bf 109 and the new British Spitfire. But they flew very differently. The Spitfire could outturn and outmaneuver the Bf 109, especially in a tight dogfight. But the Bf 109 had the edge in climbing and diving. Its biggest advantage came from its fuel injection system. The Daimler-Benz engine inside the Bf 109 injected fuel straight into the combustion chamber. This mattered more than it sounds. The Spitfire used a carburetor. When Spitfire pilots pushed into a negative G maneuver, the fuel flow would cut off or flood the engine, causing it to stall, often at the worst possible time. Meanwhile, the Bf 109 could dive away cleanly without hesitation. Later on, a small mechanical device was developed to regulate the fuel level and fix the issue, but early on it gave German pilots a critical edge. Still, by the end of the Battle of Britain, the Luftwaffe had taken serious losses. More than 600 Bf 109s were destroyed. The Luftwaffe failed to gain air superiority, and the planned invasion of Britain was scrapped. But the war was far from over. Now, before we get into the upgraded models that helped create the highest scoring aces in history, we need to talk about something that killed pilots even when no enemies were around. It was one problem that never went away: the Bf 109's narrow landing gear. Instead of being mounted under the wings, the gear was fixed to the fuselage. That gave the aircraft a smoother aerodynamic profile, but made it incredibly difficult to handle on the ground. On takeoff and landing, even small mistakes or uneven surfaces could cause the aircraft to tip, flip, or crash violently, and it happened a lot. In training alone, about 1,750 Luftwaffe pilots were killed in non-combat accidents. 10% of all Bf 109s were lost this way. Most of the time, the undercarriage was to blame, and the problem was never fully solved. As the war moved into North Africa, the Bf 109 had to adapt again. Heat, dust, and distance became new obstacles. Germany developed a tropical version of the aircraft with sand filters, drop tanks for longer range, and modifications for desert conditions. Then came June of 1941, Operation Barbarossa, the massive German invasion of the Soviet Union. The Bf 109 led the air assault. Based on lessons from Britain and North Africa, the new F variant was introduced. It dropped the wing-mounted cannons and concentrated firepower in the nose. Two synchronized MG-17 machine guns sat above the engine, and a single 20mm cannon fired through the propeller shaft. This layout reduced drag, improved balance, and made aiming cleaner. This was the version flown by Germany's top-scoring aces, including Erich Hartmann, who reached 352 confirmed kills. Right behind him was Gerhard Barkhorn with 301. As the fighting wore on, the Bf 109 kept evolving. One version in particular became the most widely produced of them all. It was called the Gustav, or the G variant. This model came with a more powerful Daimler-Benz engine, better protection for the cockpit with armoured glass, and on some versions, even a pressurised cabin designed for high-altitude interception. But the most dramatic changes came in firepower. The Bf 109G now carried two 13mm heavy machine guns mounted above the engine. These replaced the older MG-17 guns and delivered significantly more impact, and that was only part of the upgrade. The cannon that fired through the propeller shaft, originally 20mm caliber, was now replaced by a 30mm caliber weapon. That increase gave the 109 a much better chance of destroying heavy Allied bombers with a single hit. Later attempts to improve the design included the H and K variants, both focused on high-altitude performance. But none of them matched the G model in either production numbers or battlefield presence, and by that point it was already too late. The Allied bombing campaign had torn through German factories. Aircraft production was now constantly delayed. Fuel was scarce. New pilots were rushed into combat with barely any training. The Luftwaffe was being overwhelmed. As Germany collapsed, Bf 109s were pulled back into desperate last stands. They tried to intercept American bomber streams and fought above German cities until the final days of the war. And somehow, the story did not end there. After the war, the Bf 109 continued to fly. It was built under license in countries like Czechoslovakia and Spain, and in some roles, it stayed in service into the 1950s and even into the early 1960s.